reading a little bit here. My son and I have talked about it some, but I don't know if this is one that he would listen to or not. But when I just started, thought I'd give it a shot here. It's Vladimir Nabokov's Podvig, or Glory, and I've just recently started it, so I'll go ahead and we'll get started here. This was, I believe, originally published in 1970, possibly 1971. The date on his foreword is December 8th, 1970. So, I think we'll go ahead and start with the first chapter rather than the foreword. Just to not really give too much away. And maybe we'll read the foreword sometime as we go. So, chapter 1. Funny as it may seem, Martin's grandfather, Edelweiss, was a Swiss. A robust Swiss with a fluffy mustache, who in the 1860s had been tutor to the children of a St. Petersburg landowner named Indrikov, and had married his youngest daughter. Martin assumed at first that the velvety white alpine flower, that pet of herbariums, had been named in honor of his grandfather. Even later, he could not fully relinquish this notion. He remembered his grandfather distinctly, but only in one form and position: a corpulent old man, dressed completely in white, fair-whiskered, wearing a Panama hat and a pique waistcoat rich in breloques, the most amusing of which was a dagger the size of a fingernail, sitting on a bench in front of the house in a linden's mobile shade. It was on this very bench that his grandfather had died, holding in the palm of his hand his beloved gold watch, whose lid was like a little golden mirror. Apoplexy overtook him during this timely gesture, and, according to family legend, the hand stopped at the same moment as his heart. For many years after, Grandfather Edelweiss was preserved in a massive leather album. In his day, photographs were made tastefully, with elaborate deliberation. The operation was no joking matter. The patient had to be immobilized for a long time, and permission to smile had yet to come, with the advent of the snapshot. The complexity of the heliography accounted for the weightiness and solidity of Grandfather's manly poses in those somewhat pale but good quality pictures. Grandfather as a youth, with a freshly killed woodcock at his feet. Grandfather astride the mare Daisy. Grandfather on a striped veranda seat, with a black Dachshund that had refused to sit still and had come out with 3 tails in the photograph. Only in 1918 did Grandfather Edelweiss disappear altogether, for the album went up in flames, as did the table where the album lay, and, in fact, the whole country house, which the peasant chaps from the nearby village foolishly burned to the ground as it stood, instead of realizing a profit from the furnishings. Martin's father was a dermatologist, and a famous one. Like Grandfather, he too was very white-skinned and stout, enjoyed fishing for gobies in his spare time, and possessed a magnificent collection of daggers and sabers, as well as long, strange pistols, on account of which the users of more modern weapons nearly sent him before the firing squad. In the beginning of 1918, he grew bloated and short of breath, and died around March 10 in unclear circumstances. His wife Sophia and their son were living at the time near Yalta. The town kept trying on now one regime, now another, and could not make up its finicky mind. She was a rosy, freckled, youthful woman with pale hair in a big bun, high eyebrows that were thickish toward the bridge of her nose and nearly imperceptible toward her temples, and little slits, once made for now absent earrings, in the elongated lobes of her delicate ears. Only recently, in their northern country place, she still used to play a powerful, agile game of tennis on the garden court, which had been in existence since the 80s. In the autumn, she would spend a lot of time riding a black Enfield bicycle along the avenues of their park, across noisily rustling carpets of dry leaves. Or else she would set out on foot along the resilient shoulder of the highway and cover the long way, dear to her since childhood, from Olkovo to Roskonetsk, raising and lowering the end of her expensive coral-knobbed cane like a seasoned walker. In St. Petersburg, she was known as an Anglomaniac and relished this fame. She would discuss eloquently such topics as Boy Scouts or Kipling, and found a quite special delight in frequent visits to Drew's English shop, where, still on the stairs, before a large poster, a woman thickly lathering a boy's head, you were greeted by a wonderful smell of soap and lavender, with something more mixed in, something that suggested collapsible rubber tubs, soccer balls, and round, heavy, tightly swaddled Christmas puddings. It follows that Martin's first books were in English. His mother loathed the Russian magazine for children, the heartfelt Word, and inspired in him such aversion for Madame Tcharsky's young heroines with dusky complexions and titles that even much later Martin was wary of any book written by a woman, sensing even in the best of such books an unconscious urge on the part of a middle-aged and perhaps chubby lady to dress up in a pretty name and curl up on the sofa like a pussy-cat. Sophia detested diminutives, kept a strict check on herself so as not to use them, and was annoyed if her husband said, "Sonny's got the coffeekins again. Let's check his temperatura." Russian children's literature swarmed with cute lisping words when not committing the sin of moralizing. If Martin's grandfather's family name bloomed in the mountains, the magical origin of his grandmother's maiden name was a far cry from the various Volkovs, Wolfs, Kunitsins, Martins, or Belkins, Squirrelsons, and belonged to the fauna of Russian fable. Once upon a time there prowled marvelous beasts in our country, but Sophia found Russian fairy tales clumsy, cruel, and squalid, Russian folk songs inane, and Russian riddles idiotic. She had little faith in Pushkin's famous nanny, and said that the poet himself had invented her, together with her fairy tales, knitting needles, and heartache. Thus, in early childhood, Martin failed to become familiar with something that subsequently, through the prismatic wave of memory, might have added an extra enchantment to his life. However, he had no lack of enchantments, and no cause to regret that it was not the Russian knight-errant Ruslan, but Ruslan's Occidental brother that had awakened his imagination in childhood. But then, what does it matter whence comes the gentle nudge that jars the soul into motion and sets it rolling, doomed never again to stop? And that's been Chapter 1.